So I would love to just shift back a little bit, get a little bit broader perspective, and start to talk about other controversial debates that were going on at the time during the Civil War. In ninth grade, our students read several texts that highlight the contradictory role that Christianity played in both the establishment and the abolition of slavery. For example, they read the narrative of Frederick Douglass. And Douglass, who was himself a devout Christian, describes in his narrative how his slaveholder would found religious sanction for his cruelty. How should teachers approach the question of religion in both the establishment of slavery and its abolition?
This question of Christianity and slavery is central, and I think it's one that we have to grapple with. You know, I think we consider religion versus faith, right? And we consider how other societies, other peoples have used religion to wield some really terrible things on human beings. And so the United States is no different. There's definitely a contradiction between this notion of the United States as, at some points, the notion of a Christian nation, when indeed parts of the Bible were used to establish those racial hierarchies that exist. I think that Frederick Douglass is a great example of the great irony, right, of Christianity as a faith versus Christianity as a tool, as a really terrible tool used to perpetuate injustices and discrimination and so on. I would offer Phyllis Wheatley as a great example, for example, of someone who, as an enslaved young woman, produced some of the greatest American poetry. But in this poetry, she does. There's a lot of Christian imagery that she references and she repeats again and again, as a way of reminding us that Christianity has been a useful device to actually scale the injustices that have been meted out by that same Christianity, right? So it's an interesting dilemma. And you know, as an ethnomusicologist, I'll come back to music and remind us of a song that many of us know. Amazing Grace is a song that, whether you're in a Black church or in a Catholic church or in a evangelical church, we all know that song, right? But it's a song that was actually written by John Newton, who was captain of a slave ship and had participated in bringing Africans who had been stolen from their villages across the Atlantic, all those months when Africans were piled onto those ships. Just an inhumane image, speaking of images again, right, of how people were treated, human beings were treated. And at some point, and again, this was carried through with Christian justification, right, because these people are the children of Ham, or whatever the justification is, right? But he was convicted, and this is a great moment to remind us that people evolve and people can change, right? And people can become good and better, right? And so he wrote Amazing Grace as he was reflecting on the great horror of his own participation in the slave trade. I once was lost, but now I'm found, right? It's an amazing story of someone who had done terrible things against possibly thousands of human beings. And that song has now stood the test of time. It was, I was blind and now I see, So this is him grappling with probably Christianity, his own identity, and the identity of the people in the holds of the ships that he brought over. So we have to grapple with this, I think.
Yeah, I think that the distinction between faith and religion is an important one, and the distinction as well that I think of it sometimes in terms of genuine religion versus religion being used for a purpose, serving self-interest. And I think the way Frederick Douglass described it in that quotation you read as giving a religious sanction for cruelty, that in many cases religion is used after the fact to justify behavior that we want to partake in anyways. And I think the story of John Newton is a great one too, an Amazing Grace. And it shows us that genuine religion, in my view, it often prompts conversion rather than confirming what we're already doing, right? That if your religion says that everything you do is just fine and you don't have to do anything differently, chances are that religion was made or is being used to serve your interests or the interests of others, because religions just tend not to do that, right? A genuine religion prompts changes in behavior and conversion and takes us outside of our comfort zone and what we want to do on our own. And that's, I think, true across the board for world religions of many different kinds, particularly certainly for Christianity in the American context. So I think there is an important distinction to be drawn between a sort of genuine religion or a genuine Christianity, as Frederick Douglass would understand it, that supports abolition, right, the cause of abolition, versus religion serving self-interest, which to my mind is clearly the case when religious arguments and Christian arguments were used to justify enslavement. So I think that's a really important distinction to be used. And actually in the Constitutional Convention on August 21st, there's this debate at the very beginning of that day between Luther Martin from Maryland and John Rutledge from South Carolina. Luther Martin says that slavery is contrary to the principles of morality and religion. And then John Rutledge says that doesn't matter because what we're talking about is interest. That in this question, what matters is interest, not religion or morality. And that is right there in the Constitutional Convention, I think portrays clearly what side religion was originally on before it was used more so in the antebellum era to justify slavery after the fact. I think that's more the truth of the matter than religion being sort of genuinely used to support the institution of slavery.
I think too that along those same lines, thinking about faith and religion and the ways in which religion have been used. If we think about Martin Luther King and that letter that he wrote from the Birmingham jail, I think it's a great way of really putting religion on notice, right? And putting religious leaders who were still doing very bad things, right? Or religious leaders who hadn't had a personal conviction to change. I love what Adam said about, if you're not changing, if you're not evolving and getting better, then you need to check it. You do need to check and see. And the thing that I always tell my children is, what do you think the character of God is? Is the character of God a character that would enslave people or put one group of people over the other, or these are the big questions, right? So King asks the religious leaders at the time, Christian leaders, to think about what they were doing, what they were supporting, where their allegiance lay in terms of progress and goodness and the real values of Christianity. I think that's such a great text that allows us to get to the heart of this question.